Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Spartan Journal podcast. Today, we have two really cool topics to talk with you guys about. But before we do that, I want to jump into a quick 5-day market recap of the major indexes as well as crude oil. Russell 2000 is up 1.47%. The NASDAQ is up 2.2%. Dow Jones is up 1.18%. And the S&P is up 0.18%. And crude oil per barrel is up 8.65%. So yeah, jumping into our first topic, we're going to be talking about crude oil. We're going to be talking about the war in Iran, Strait of Hormuz, kind of the effects that are coming from this war, as well as why crude oil is so expensive. And I'm sure you guys have seen it around these gas stations as well.
For sure. Yeah, so just for a little bit of background of what is happening and how it kind of started off. So first off, Iran, Israel, US are all tension. There's so much tension between the two. To give you a little bit of background, the US and Israel have been teaming up together. We've had a pact with them, and it's mainly because Iran's powerful nuclear program, right? We're both fearing that they're going to basically rule the world because they have some of the best scientists to ever do it. Their nuclear program has been evolving over the years, and it's gotten huge, right? But what we've seen is that recently there's been some missile activities. Donald Trump told Iran to stop doing that. Then they didn't, and then we bombed them, and then that started kind of the big war that we're seeing and the whole conflict in the Strait of Hormuz.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like at its core, it is a geopolitical struggle. It's a struggle between the U.S. and Israel and Iran. It's kind of a struggle between, who is going to win kind of this nuclear arms race in a way, because the U.S. is, in a way, trying to make sure that Iran doesn't have as many nuclear weapons as it did before. But I think the more relevant discussion for today was the Strait of Hormuz, and how does Iran's blockade over that, and how does their control over that strait? It's a 2-mile strait from I think what I've heard.
21 miles wide, 2 miles where ships are actually able to go through.
Right, super small strait. And the question really is, with that blockade in place and with ships that have gone there in the past facing fines up to almost $2 million, how does that kind of impact the global trade of oil? Because I know that it's about 20% of the world's crude oil and 20% of the natural gas, which are critical resources, honestly, in today's world, are being passed through that strait.
Yeah, some key points to go over for the Strait of Hormuz, other than the fact that, like you said, over 20% of global oil comes through this area. And again, that's not just for the United States, but that's countries in Europe and all over the world. So it's very important. Some more things why it's so important. There's limited alternatives for routes, and the alternatives that there are much farther. They're going to take longer to ship, and it's going to be more expensive. So that, again, all messing with supply chain logistics as well. And then
also, I feel like a big thing is location, right? The location, like Israel is the southeast or southwest end of not Israel. I mean Iran it's on the strait. Or
it's north. Iran is north, south is Oman and the UAE.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen like Iran's trying to claim this because they just feel like they have the ability to take it in because they're so close to it. And I mean, what we've seen so far is the main reason that boat traffic has gotten killed basically is because Iran has been releasing threats to the boats that are passing through that are helping either America or any of their like people that they do not like or they do not want to associate. They're helping them, and then they have gotten bombed, and then that leads into the fear that all the other boats of not wanting to get bombed, if that makes sense. Like it's just a whole problem, and we're seeing this come into play with oil prices and how that's kind of affected the U.S.
Yeah, I think that we've seen the shipping insurance, war insurance, everything go up with this. Another thing to mention is kind of the alternatives that the United States could look into for energy. So will we move more into solar, wind, energy sources where we're not as dependent on other countries, because when geopolitical conflict like this arises, Iran has a lot of power in being able to shut a strait like this down, and this is hurting us, and it's not really hurting them as much because they're selling oil at a higher price.
Yeah, right. And although there's one point to mention, I think that the U.S. has gained so much control over the oil. So we've seen recently that they overtook Venezuela. They had a military intervention there. So with the newfound oil there, oil prices, obviously they've been increasing a lot with the Strait being blocked and with supply chain issues going on. There's a limited supply to go around all over the world. So the question is, with that local supply in the U.S., there might be a slightly different time where oil prices do stabilize because there is a newfound supply.
Yeah.
But Trump had said recently that there might be some decreases that are happening to these exports. He doesn't want to give up that oil to other countries. He doesn't want to trade it. So with that happening and with so much long-term stability around oil, I do agree that I think there is going to be a shift towards renewable energy.
Yeah. I feel like building off of your point, I feel like it could have been a lot worse, right? I think that's what you're trying to say. Like
right.
that with what we have and the recent events that have been going on, even though 20% of the stuff is coming from the Strait, I mean, the U.S. does have I think we have at least 15 million barrels a day that have been being produced, and then with the Venezuelan, we got more. So, I mean, this problem could be a lot worse, right? But we're seeing it still affect, and, I mean, it's still not great, but...
Yeah, it's interesting to think about and try to figure out how much these price spikes and then the other sectors going down, how much of this is speculation and how much of this is actually because of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down and supply shocks. So is it because of investor uncertainty, or is it because of things that are actually going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because of what's going on, but I mean, we'll tell you, yeah. I mean, I think building off into a different point, we can talk about like what we're actually doing to fix this problem. So recently, Donald Trump just addressed the nation. April 1st was yesterday, and he kind of talked about ending the war and what's going to happen and kind of what we're looking to do. So as of now, the person that Donald Trump is he's a very aggressive person. We've seen this from what's been happening. He bombed Tehran pretty recently because of Iran's ability to not really work with them as well as he would have liked. So he's been talking about threatening them and basically bombing them back to the Stone Ages is what he said. So if Iran doesn't really give back the Strait of Hormuz and open it back up, eliminate their threats of what they're doing and eliminate all that stuff, then Donald Trump's going to go in and he has the units. I mean, he's surrounded them. He's got units in Afghanistan, all around Iran, and he's going to basically just bomb them. So we're going to see how this impacts their choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and with so many troops stationed there, I think it's kind of less like an ideological battle alongside an economic battle. The economic battle was the Strait of Hormuz. It was one part of this bigger conflict where the U.S. and Israel and Iran are kind of competing against each other in a way where the U.S. is trying to impose their ideology onto the Middle East, and in a way where some of the ideologies that they might not agree with, they're trying to impose control over Iran. So that's another battle that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I think time will kind of tell how this conflict specifically with the oil goes. And then we've seen energy also increase through the financial markets as well.
Yes.
So with that response from investors and with that amount of confidence, how does that impact the oil, and how does that play out in the long term? That's something that we're going to go and see.
Yes, agreed. It's something to keep an eye on how this war will resolve the Strait of Hormuz, and then again seeing, even if it does open up, how are investors going to react to this? How much of this is speculation? All something to keep an eye on. But moving into our next topic, we're going to be talking about Sysco, one of the major food distributors in the United States, and their merger of Jetro, which is considered to be the Costco for restaurants.
Yeah, so I mean, big acquisition, as we can see, it was an enterprise value of $29.1 billion, right? So Jetco, what they are is they kind of work with the smaller businesses, and they're more of like a Costco, like you said. So Sysco working in more delivery service and with more high impacting clients, bigger businesses, and Jetro working with the more smaller business and more the style of you come in, you get your supplies, and then you leave, right? So there's no delivery fees. There's nothing on that kind of stage. So I mean, this is a big benefit for Sysco, right? Because now they have the high impact clients, and then they have the low clients, and they can work with basically everyone. Like they can almost like rule the market, and we're gonna see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge advantage, honestly, to Sysco here. We've seen that their management does have confidence in the business model, right? Like you said, the wholesale business model that kind of Jetro is running. after all, Jetro is the number one U.S. cash and carry wholesaler in that way. So with this business model being on the rise and with that amount of confidence in Jetro, I think this was a deal that was well justified. The financials do look, there are some warning signs for the financials as well, but I think as the deal goes, it is a pretty stable and well informed deal.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like from the outside, or initially looks like a great deal. Cisco taking control of over 25% of this food distribution industry. But then under their announcement of this news, we saw their stock price fall around 12%.
Yeah.
And this looked to be accredited to their announcement of having to leverage, I think it was $21 billion in debt.
Yeah, and I think it's not just that. I think if we look a little bit into the deal structure as well, I think the debt is also valid, but if we look into the deal structure, then essentially what's going to happen is that these Jetro shareholders, they're going to receive $21.6 billion in cash as part of the acquisition, but also another component of it is a stock component. So these shareholders are going to receive 91.5 million of these shares, so that's about 20% of the shares outstanding.
Yeah, and what we've seen has been happening is that the investors that are currently with Cisco have seen their outstanding shares kind of deplete and have been diluted, as the word we say. And I mean, I feel like that's the main thing, right? Like when there's so many shares that have been brought in, like we just introduced, 91 million new shares. The share worth value of the people that currently hold has just gone so far lower, and that's led to a lot of people selling, and then we've seen the stock just completely deplete. Basically.
It's been so interesting to see this trend of companies announcing mergers and acquisitions, having to leverage debt, and this change in company structure, and kind of how that can negatively affect the company and their stock price. We saw this in Netflix, we saw this in Paramount, we saw this in Nebius last week. Again, announcing possibly great deals, but then the structuring of it, how it might change the company. These investors are really scared of the uncertainty that it could bring. And we've seen a big negative reaction of that a couple of times now.
Yeah, and honestly, I think time will honestly tell when these investors, this negativity around some of these deals, when does that kind of fade away, and when do those, objectives and kind of goals align with management's, which is for the company to ultimately grow, for them to see a positive ROI on kind of the stocks that they own. So
I think this is more of a short-term thing, right? Like everyone's getting all this uncertainty of their shares, but I mean, you just made this huge deal, right? Like you're going to be able to work with all these different types of clients, right? There's so many pros. The only con is the short term. Everyone's gotten the uncertainty, but as we've seen, Cisco released something where they predict that their earnings will start to become impacted by this deal in 2027. So right, that's a whole year away, and people are just reacting to it now. Like they're only reacting to it right away. Like we need to see this whole play out before we can really judge it.
And looking into the future, with these companies combined, they're looking or estimated to do around $100 billion in revenue. As well as Cisco's kind of pledge and commanding to open around 125 new Jetro stores, which I guess would be Cisco stores now, in the next 5 years. So looking forward, there seems to be a lot of upsides. It'll be interesting to see it all play out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's just, again, everything, great stuff to keep an eye on. I know we'll keep an eye on how this war is going to get resolved, hopefully get resolved in the Strait of Hormuz being opened back up fully. And then seeing how crude oil prices, flights, and gas will react to that. Hopefully gas prices come down for us and everyone around.
Hopefully. This $4 a gallon stuff's getting pretty tough on the pocket, I will say.
Yeah, we get the bikes out and start walking maybe. But and then as well as just seeing how Cisco leverages this debt moving forward. Just what they're gonna do and how this acquisition is going to look for their company. So something to keep an eye on. We thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We had a great time talking about it as well. You guys have a good one.
Have a good one.